because at the bottom of the Java client it says do not distribute. It's burning. So, how's it going? What's that? Nuh-uh, not yet. Not nearly. Hello. Hi. Have a nice one, man. Yeah. How do you know it's solo? Oh, mostly solo. I have a few friends, relatives join. Huh. That's nice. come on. So tomorrow my schedule is gonna be strained a little bit because that actually is a pretty good question. So in 2013, I created like a little thing, like as a play thing, called the Minecraft Agency, right? And I played along with it, with like a cool little spy agency, but then it quickly transformed to like, you know, like a military-esque thing, you know, like where you know, it's like a play thing. And, you know, it kind of stuck. I'm like, you know what would be cool? What if I transitioned this into like a real life thing? I know it sounds weird. I'm like, what if I could make like a real life version? So like, you know what? That's gonna happen. I'm gonna change it to something more professional. So I changed to the Abbott Agency in 2019. Coincidentally, the same year I made this channel. So therefore, I actually this channel used to be called the Abbott Agency, and I put live on the end because I was gonna make this my live channel. But I'm very close to taking off the live at the end, because honestly, with YouTube's addition, with the live and videos button that can help filter, you know, live streams and videos, I honestly am just gonna probably take it off, because honestly there's just no point. What the hell? You did not just... Oh. Oh wait, he despawned. Big sad. It's this giant base. Yeah, I'm gonna put a village up top. Hello. I'm trying. Well, my sister will be joining the world. I need to build a system that will connect our islands together with a rail cart. I could go underground, but I want to go with something more stylish. You probably know where this is gonna go. Underwater tunnel. Lol. I was just learning about apparently about the opera house, and there was this guy. I don't know. It was like a lottery associated with the opera house, and some dude won this lottery, and this guy got really pissed that someone else won the lottery, so he proceeded to abduct this kid, and he said, "Hey, if you don't give me your lottery money, I'm gonna feed this kid to the sharks." Unfortunately, he did gag the kid when he kidnapped the kid, and it caused him to basically suffocate to death. And apparently one of Australia's largest manhunts occurred where $15,000 was offered to bring that guy to justice. What an evil dude. Yeah, I'm gonna try to see if I can do that underwater. Getting some stuff for some stone bricks. Wonder why that is. You know, I want to watch this video. It's called r/morbid reality. I'm not. Okay, I have to be completely honest with people. I have a morbid curiosity. Not that I like death and destruction and despair, but I feel like everybody has a morbid curiosity of some sorts. It's just at varying levels. I don't know why. I want to listen to this guy. r/morbid curiosity 21 by Alurus, or whatever it's called. Aylurus.
What exactly is a joke? And I'm not asking for its definition.
Morbid is like kind of like the dark things, like true crime, paranormal stuff, and just genuinely creepy stuff. You know what I mean?
We all know what a joke is. We all know what its denotation is. What's the connotation? What counts as a joke? What makes something funny? What can we make fun of? I want you to think about that while I tell you this story, because what happened, while disturbing, many people online found amusing. So much so, there was a small community made around the joke, and the beginning of all of it would take place in Sasebo. It's the second biggest city in the Nagasaki prefecture, and for the longest time, it was only locally notable. The city had a historical significance, specifically because of the city's port. It was utilized heavily during World War II, but as of now, it's known for something else. Because 20 years ago, on June 1st, 2004, the city of Sasebo would encounter a serious and violent tragedy. This is Natsumi Tsuji, born November 21st, 1992, and by 2004, she was 11 and attending the Okubo Elementary School located in Sasebo. According to her teachers and her peers, she had an extraordinary intellect with an approximate IQ of 140. She was
Jesus Christ!
A student, often seen immersed in her
Damn! By the way, that is... I want this to resonate with you, chat. Yeah. By the way, this girl, 11 years old, and she has an IQ of 140. That, technically, by IQ standards, that makes her a genius. An IQ of 140 makes you a genius. Holy! This girl is probably smarter, and she is way younger than me. That is nuts. 140 IQ.
Reading, drawing manga, and writing.
I actually didn't know people this young could have such a high IQ. Not saying kids are dumb. I mean, hey, intellect usually gains with age. It starts low and it gets higher, but damn, that is extremely high.
Her interest took a turn. She was very, very interested in violent Japanese films, specifically Battle Royale, which is a movie that depicted the violent deaths of an entire class of Japanese students, with the twist being that all the deaths were perpetrated by their fellow peers, with the hope of being the last to survive. Natsumi was completely obsessed with this concept.
That's actually one of the inspirations behind Fortnite and other Battle Royales.
Were all about murder. Her fascination with the macabre didn't even stop at films. She would create a website that would host videos of death, violent hentai, and gore. Most of the content focusing on mutilation. And that's key here, because her interest in mutilation led her to act out her fantasies in a very specific way.
Okay.
On June 1st,
yeah, not so innocent anymore.
Tsuji would manipulate and blindfold an old friend of hers. Her name was Satomi Mitarai. Natsumi lured Satomi into an empty classroom, where she tricked her friend into thinking that she wanted to play a game, and to play the game properly, Satomi needed to be blindfolded. A few moments after Satomi put the blindfold on, Natsumi pulled a box cutter out of her pocket and quickly slashed Satomi's throat. But that was only the beginning. Natsumi didn't stop. The young girl inflicted multiple additional cuts on Satomi's arms, and it wouldn't be long until Satomi died from massive blood loss.
Dude.
From there, Natsumi packed up all of her things.
Man, she had IQ that high, and she wasted it on that.
Natsumi, she neglected to clean up her clothes.
Shame.
Her hands, arms, and torso were covered in blood. So when she walked to her next period, her teacher, noticing the blood-soaked clothes and box cutter in her possession, immediately raised an alarm. Emergency medical services were summoned, but upon their arrival, they found Satomi's lifeless body. And in the meantime, Natsumi was being investigated and arrested. And when asked if she killed Satomi, she simply responded with, "I did something wrong, right? I'm sorry." Natsumi would quickly be placed in a cell where...
Okay, I have to say, at that point, she's just mentally effed up. I mean, I think honestly, if you feel like it's okay to like, or if you go through with killing a human being like that, like maybe outside of war, right? That's just psychologically, like, you know, like it just probably makes you insane. It is actually very impressive to me that she has this high of IQ, yet she seems so deranged. That is a twist. I did not see that coming. That is dark.
Interrogations would occur. She would go into detail about why she went out of her way to kill her friend. Natsumi said that she killed Satomi because Satomi had made a comment on her weight and body online. Natsumi felt slandered and felt like she needed to do something about it. So she retrieved a box cutter, either from her home or from school, and decided to do what she did. Natsumi's name and her age were unknown for a short period. Because she was a minor, much of that information was private. But because this crime was committed by an 11-year-old girl, many individuals on the internet wanted to really know who...
That's a kid. That is sad. That's a minor, and that minor committed murder. Freaking not like a assault or burglar. No, murder. Like, she took a life out of this world, and she's not even an adult. Actual wowzers.
And because she was 11, it wasn't like any of her personal information was difficult to find. Much of the conversation about
ruined
what she
her
did
life.
Who she was occurred on image boards, specifically Futaba and 2chan. And her story would spread like wildfire. She became a disturbing meme overnight and was nicknamed Nevada-tan. Many people found it amusing and interesting that an 11-year-old girl was capable of such a gruesome murder. And because Natsumi was interested in gore videos and violent content online, many users on 4chan, 2chan, and Futaba identified themselves with her and thought of her as some sort of cute, murderous animal.
You know what? I would say, what's wrong with people? It's if it's 2, 4, or 8chan, I'm gonna warn you guys. Always expect degenerosity. Nothing good comes out of 4chan. Like, that is where human dignity and respect go to die. Like, if you actively want to be dumber, if you think Reddit is bad, dude, especially like on like Poll or like B, that, man, you do not want to like really associate with those guys.
Character. Many jokes, memes, and artistic images were created around Nevada.
Actually, why?
Community that were completely enthralled with this individual and what she had done. And during all of this, she was receiving psychiatric treatment. Because she was 11, they couldn't put her in jail, but she could not be around other students. And after 4 years
I don't watch
isolated
it.
to a psychiatric treatment facility, she was sent to an actual prison. It wouldn't be until 2013 until she would be released. She was 20 years old and she had spent her entire teenage years in a juvenile prison. Her name was changed to protect her privacy, and her whereabouts are unknown. Yet the legacy of Nevada-tan persists.
This next one.
The Guilford National Forest, located in Washington State, is described as a hiker's delight with a land area greater than 1.3 million acres.
Damn.
The people who choose to explore this national forest are experts at it. A lot of them are seasoned hikers who know the national forest like the back of their hand. But of course, the national forest isn't only for expert hikers. There are plenty of clearly marked trails that anybody can follow that showcase the beauty of the park.
I've been to Washington State. It's a really pretty
but what if you're
state.
not an expert?
A lot of
what
greenery.
If you're just a moderate hiker and you decide to go off the marked path? I'm going to share with you a story of someone who did exactly that, and why they haven't been seen alive since June 9th, 2013. This is Maureen Lenawea Kelly. She and her family are Pacific Islanders, and the way that she was raised and the beliefs that she maintained led her to want to have a spiritual quest after she graduated high school. Her personality was incredibly carefree. Her friends described her as a laid-back girl, and her behaviors would absolutely emphasize that. She wanted to be a singer and songwriter, and she would post her songs onto YouTube, with many of her videos featuring her playing a ukulele, all while singing at the same time. And in between all of that, Maureen decided that she was ready for her spiritual journey, and she chose Guilford National Forest as a place to do it. On June 9th, 2013, she left her friends, who also joined her on this journey, around 5 p.m. She planned on meeting back with her friends around midnight. That's when her friends noticed her taking off her shoes, her clothes, and she was only going to wear a fanny pack around her waist that contained knives, matches, and a compass.
What?
Then she walked right into the forest. Some time would pass.
Like
and
all
she
of her
failed to
clothes. She
rendezvous
took
with
off
her
all of her
friends.
clothes and
At
went
this
in
point, it
with a
was
fanny
June
pack?
10th, in the early hours of the morning.
What the hell?
Her friends would contact the police, and
That's
a missing
very
persons report would be
suspicious.
filed. And from there, a rescue attempt had begun, and many people started searching the forest. Of the 1.3 million acres, only 4 square miles was searched for her, and nothing turned up. Her fanny pack wasn't found, a campsite wasn't found, nothing was found that would indicate that a woman was lost in the forest. This was incredibly concerning because many of the investigators and rescuers noted that the forest wasn't completely flat. It was basically a valley. Once you exit the trail and enter the forest, there are very steep hills and cliffs that you could encounter by accident. And one of the many theories as to what happened to Maureen was that she may have fallen down a steep hill.
And it's really hard to keep your footing on those steep hills. I had a valley like ravine before it was mostly destroyed on my property, and it's very hard to keep your steady.
From the beginning of the search, dogs were unable to get a trace of her smell, making tracking her down incredibly difficult. And when asked and interviewed, one of the rescuers said, "You could literally walk right on top of somebody if they're rolled under a log, and you would never know it." And that statement is very important. The forest near the trails were pretty tidy. There wasn't a whole lot of dead material on the ground, but deeper into the forest, there's less maintenance, making it even more difficult for them to find Maureen. It would be 10 days until the search was called off. Maureen's family protested, asking for an extension.
That sucks.
And her case
Having a family member go missing is horrible, but the worst thing is, if I ever had to have all my family members go missing or die, I want the body to bury it. Like, I want their body so I can bury it. But now she will never get a proper burial, which means she's out there. She'll decompose somewhere, forgotten by all except for her family. So yeah, this one girl basically took off all of her clothes in the middle of the woods with a fanny pack full of knives and shit and just went into the woods and just disappeared. That is so odd.
Theory being that her disappearance was accidental. There wasn't any evidence found of foul play or suicide, so many people believe that she succumbed to her environment. You see, as the night progressed on June 9th, temperatures in the forest dropped significantly.
Yeah, it's
And it
Washington.
rained. Many rescuers and investigators believe she simply succumbed to hypothermia, and her body remains somewhere to be found in the middle of that giant forest.
That genuinely sucks.
According to the National Weather Service, jumping into cold water can trigger involuntary gasping, rapid breathing, or hyperventilating due to the sudden shock of sudden immersion. And that's not to be taken lightly. Even the most skilled swimmers forget how to swim in cold water. The temperature and sensation...
Okay, now, I want you to try something at home. Now, be careful if you ever try this. If you think you can survive cold water, I want you to do this right now. Go find like a little 1-gallon bucket, or maybe like 4 or 5 liter container, fill it with water and ice. Put your hand in. Be careful how long you put your hand in. Yeah, put your hand in and see how long you can last. I did it and I only lasted like 2 seconds. Now, that's your hand. What about your body? Submerged in ice water. I mean, ugh.
Of nearly frozen water is that jarring to the senses. But there are many ways to survive if you do fall into a frozen lake. In most situations like that, you're able to prop your body up on the cracked ice. All you have to do is kick your legs behind you and slowly nudge your way up onto the ice. Kicking your legs behind you makes you...
Oh yeah, I'm not saying you have to do it.
Onto the ice.
But yeah.
That tactic is only useful in an ideal situation. What if you were to jump into a lake and immediately be pulled under?
Oh, I've seen this video. Okay, so this woman, I think there's like... So one of the things of like her... I don't know if it's of her religion, I'm not shaming it, or whatever she was doing. She wanted to swim in this river that was spiritual, and you know, it's a spiritual when you swim into it, when the ice covers it. Well, unfortunately, so like they drill holes or they drill squares in the ice to swim in it. Well, unfortunately, this woman didn't realize that there's actually a current underneath. So when she dove in, she tried to dive up, but the current pulled her under the river, and it took days for the river to thaw out and her to be found. I love doing that. It's so fun.
Ice. What could you do then?
Drowning under ice has to be one of the worst ways to die. You're cold and your body can barely do anything. And you know, you have to fight against the ice, which may not break if it's so thick. That has to be one of the worst ways to die. I feel like really people don't really realize how powerful water is as a force. I mean, when it's in small quantities, like in the form of a cup, not really that much. But when you get into larger quantities, yeah, it gets really powerful. 6 inches of rushing water is enough to sweep an adult off their feet. For you, if you're like 10 years old, you're probably gonna take like 4 inches.
And a mother of 2.
By the way, I have somewhat of a near drowning experience. We have this thing called the Mackinac. We used to rent out this campsite. We don't rent it out anymore. We've basically gotten rid of it. There was actually a murder committed next to our campsite. So the campsite that was our neighbors, there was a murder there. How many CM can you do that? I don't know. The Mackinac in Illinois is notorious for being a very dangerous river. I had muck boots on. I went to a particularly somewhat deep area that was like only probably like, I'd say 3-4 inches deeper than what I had, and I started to get pulled under because the water filled my boots. Right, I was in with my boots and I had my water filled in. Well, I was starting to sink, and I just did that, and I was able to quickly get away. It wasn't that big of an area. It was kind of like a little dimple in the river, but I quickly got away. And I've actually felt rushing water against me. Even a couple inches of rushing water is very powerful. And if you are not steady enough, you can get swept off your feet.
To celebrate the Orthodox Epiphany, she wanted to jump into a frozen river. Little did this woman know that the river was still running under the ice, and the current was incredibly strong. As soon as she jumped in, everyone around immediately knew something was wrong. The plan was for her to jump down vertically, but she instead jumped at a slight angle that made her catch the current, and it was just strong enough to pull her under the ice, making it incredibly difficult for anyone to rescue her. It also didn't help that the river water was murky and it was dark out. All of these factors led to her rescue being almost impossible. Her husband jumped in quickly, but he couldn't find her. Her children were in the background watching.
A centimeter is 0.39 inches.
After not being able to find his wife, the husband would go on to call the authorities, and they would send a scuba diver to try and retrieve her. At this point, there was some optimism that maybe she could be rescued, but as the night progressed, expectations changed to a recovery. As of now, her body has not been recovered and is presumed to have been carried down the length of the river.
That's a scary thing. I've heard about that story before.
Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed
Morbid reality number 22.
The internet is a vast place. Nearly any question that comes to mind can be answered with a simple keystroke. Any curiosity can be quelled with a simple search term. And yet, when we hit enter and look upon the very answer we sought out to find, many of us experience a very peculiar kind of cognitive dissonance. The answer you sought out is grotesque and disturbing. And yet, you can't look away, and you don't know why. It's almost like coming to grips with our morbid reality is a task.
Morbid Reality 22 by Aluris.
Nestled in between Nepal and China is the tallest peak in the world. And for that very
K2,
prominent feature,
and its
Mount
big brother,
Everest
Mount
is a
Everest.
destination for all those who want to test their might. Whether to prove to others or to themselves, these people climb this mountain not only to experience the highest point on the planet, but to...
Okay, by the way, really creepy fact about Mount Everest is that if you die so far up that mountain, there will be no effort to bring your body back down, and you become a landmark. There was this man that wore green boots, and he passed away trying to climb Mount Everest, and he literally became a landmark. Like, you could be like, oh, did you pass green boots? And then name you, like, green boots, yellow coat, blue boots, yada yada, right? That guy passed away at the top of the mountain, or near the top, and the cold, or the ice, or should I say low temperature snow and ice, they preserve the body way better. So the body decomposes way slower. Or you should say Mount Everest is not the most dangerous mountain. About from land to sea level, or no, from sea level to the summit, yeah, it is the biggest. The only reason there's a lot of deaths on Mount Everest is because so many people try to climb it. A more dangerous mountain is K2, which is not too far from Everest.
To experience the euphoria of conquering a piece of terrain that has taken many lives. Mount Everest is 8,848 meters tall, or 29,000 feet. And unfortunately for many people who attempted this climb, they wouldn't even make it halfway up the mountain before succumbing to its harsh environment and subsequently being left to die on the side of a mountain, their body forever frozen in perpetuity.
Yeah.
So to begin today's video, I'm going to talk about one of these unfortunate souls who made the brave attempt to climb this inhospitable mountain. This is Donald Lynn Cash. He's 55 years old and he's from Utah, and he was a hiking enthusiast, specifically mountain hiking. He would share most of his adventures on social media, where not only he would share his literal hiking experiences, but also occasionally sharing his thoughts and feelings about hiking in general. Before his attempt at summiting Mount Everest, he chose to take a sabbatical from his job so that he would have ample opportunity and time to prep and train for this hike. It was something that he was looking forward to. Attempting to summit Mount Everest was his overall goal when it came to mountain hiking. He enjoyed the hobby, but he knew that this was the mountain to hike, the summit to conquer. All the other mountains that he hiked, all the other adventures that he went on, simply gave him the training necessary to climb Mount Everest. And on May 2nd, 2019, he finally got on the flight to Nepal and was ready to conquer this mountain. To truly understand what happened to Don Cash, you need to know that there's certain portions of the mountain that are extra challenging. One of those portions is Hillary's Step. This portion of Mount Everest is a nearly vertical rock face with a height around 12 meters or 40 feet. It's located on the southeast ridge, halfway between the south summit and the true summit.
Having to climb that in the cold sounds like it sucks.
Challenging. The vertical nature of this step makes it incredibly difficult to climb.
Whole step,
on top
12
of the fact
foot.
that it's also within the death zone of the mountain, which is a
Death
section
zone.
of...
Basically, the death zone usually occurs above 8,000. Where is it? Hillary Step, 8,000. Yep, 8,000 meters. That is the max you can go before oxygen starts to rapidly decrease in the atmosphere. And the air here is not really good to breathe. This is why we call it the dead zone. Look at all those bodies above the dead zone. Let's see, death zone. Yeah, literally, it says it right here. 8,000 meters. The amount of oxygen in the death zone is insufficient to sustain human life. An extended stay in the zone without supplementary oxygen will result in deterioration of bodily functions, loss of consciousness, and ultimately death.
That has very low levels of oxygen, which makes climbing this portion incredibly difficult. Your bones and muscles will begin to ache as you climb this portion of the mountain, making every movement laborious and incredibly calculated. The low-pressure environment within the death zone is the reason why you can't breathe, and many people, unfortunately, have died on this step because of the immense physical strain and hypoxia. It's frighteningly easy for many climbers to finish climbing over the step and then unknowingly stepping off the side of the mountain because of the delirium that hypoxia causes and the overall strain and exhaustion that many of these climbers face and experience after going over this step. Don Cash knew of all of the risk. He was aware of just how difficult this climb would be, and his family absolutely supported him. In fact, the last message that he sent to his wife before he embarked on this journey was to thank her and the children that they share for all of their support for him, and understanding that this attempt at summiting
diamonds. Finally, we have the byproduct of diamonds.
He would be one of many to start that climb on May 22nd, and it was noted that the Sherpas, the people who would help him climb that mountain, were a little bit strained. The conditions on the mountain that day were harsh, but everybody trekked on, and everything seemed fine. He was even able to climb Hillary's Step without any trouble.
That's
Within
good.
a short period of time, Don Cash was able to summit the mountain, but something was horribly wrong. Even though Don Cash was an avid hiker, he was 55, and for whatever reason, that final trek all the way up until the summit took everything out of him. And unfortunately, after taking all of the photos and experiencing the summit, on the way down near Hillary's Step, Don Cash had a heart attack. And in any other circumstance, a sudden heart attack is manageable. But this occurred in the death zone. He simply did not have enough time to be properly stabilized and taken down the mountain.
Dude, that sucks. At least he got to the top, man.
Among all the people that
I'm not disregarding his death, but dude, at least bro got to the top of Mount Everest.
He would succumb to the cardiac arrest, and his body has been left on the mountain. There was an
Rest in
opportunity
peace,
for him to
man.
be
You
taken
did
down
it.
off of the mountain, but his family wanted him to remain there. They wanted him to stay on the very mountain that he had spent his entire life trying to summit. His family, even while mourning, made sure to celebrate the success of him summiting the mountain, even if he didn't survive on the way down.
At least he fulfilled his wishes, right?
I'm sure many of us know exactly where we were on September 11, 2001. Everyone has a story. Everyone has feelings about what happened, even after 22 years. Many people experienced incredible levels of anxiety, fear, and paranoia after that terrible event. The world was simply different after what happened in New York. So imagine for a moment, you're a New Yorker, and it's November 12th, 2001, with the memory and trauma of 9/11 only 2 months behind you. Imagine turning on the television and seeing the fire, destruction, and carnage left in Queens after another plane fell out the sky.
Wait, what?
An American Airlines plane crashes in a Queens neighborhood moments after taking off from JFK Airport. All 255 people on board are believed dead. 6 others on the ground are missing, and tonight, federal investigators on the scene trying to figure out how and why.
It was a neighborhood in flames and chaos.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that could definitely be a plane. When planes crash, they explode violently. Like, now, I know that's a no-brainer, but there's just so much fuel on a jet, that jet fuel just violently explodes with a large explosion.
For the people who saw it come down.
I walk in the top of the roof and I see the piece. The engine is shut down fast, and after that, the tracks go all the way in. Over here.
What the hell? So a plane fell out of the sky?
The transformer sparked as neighbors helped firefighters pull hoses. Nearby, one of the plane's engines had broken off and landed on the property of a gas station just feet away from the gas tanks. The owner tried to put the fire out with a garden hose.
American Airlines Flight 587 was a regularly scheduled international passenger flight from JFK International Airport to Las Americas International Airport in Santo Domingo, located in the Dominican Republic. The plane was an Airbus A300 that was built in 1988. And on November 12th, there were 260 people on board of the plane, 9 of those people being crew members. The 2 pilots who were flying this plane were Captain Edward States, who was 42 years old, and 34-year-old Sten Mullen, who was actually flying the entire time. The flight was cleared to take off at 9:11 a.m. Eastern Time, and wouldn't leave the runway until 9:14 a.m. Around 9:15 a.m., the captain made initial contact with the departure controller, informing him that the airplane was around 1,300 feet in the air, and climbing to about 5,000 feet. The controller instructed the aircraft to climb and maintain 13,000 feet, and the flight data recorder showed that the events leading to the crash began when the aircraft hit wake turbulence from another passenger airplane that was just ahead. In response to the turbulence, Mullen moved the rudder to the right and then to the left and then back again in quick succession. These sudden movements caused the vertical stabilizer to separate from the aircraft, and it fell into Jamaica Bay, about 1 mile away from the wreckage site. Almost immediately after the vertical stabilizer was separated from the plane, the aircraft pitched downward, The pilots struggled to control the aircraft. It had entered into a flat spin because of the loss of the vertical stabilizer. And because of that spin, aerodynamic loads were placed on both engines of the aircraft. The engines couldn't take the stress, and they were sheared off the aircraft, subsequently being tossed north and east of the main wreckage site. The sudden loss of both engines cut power to the FDR, or flight data recorder, and that moment was timestamped, specifically at 9:16 a.m. The cockpit voice recorder was still
only 5
running
minutes
at the
after
time. It was running on
takeoff.
emergency energy. And once
That's
that was
not
gone,
that
it
long.
stopped at 9:16, only a couple seconds after the loss of both engines. And the last recorded words captured by the cockpit voice recorder were absolutely chilling. Both pilots were terrified, and the final recording, even though it was short, captured in its entirety their fear and desperation. Officer Sten Mullen was the first to appear on the recording.
What the hell are we into? We're stuck in it.
These words were said while Sten Mullen was trying to break out of the flat spin. Quickly, the second pilot, Captain Edward States, would interject.
Get out of it! Get out of it!
And it would only be moments until
That's a problem about spins I've heard in planes, that they're very hard to get out of. Once you go in a spin, you usually don't come out.
46 passengers, 9 crew members, all presumed dead. Hospitals near the crash site did take injuries, but most of them were firefighters who got hurt putting down the blaze and looking for survivors.
Just
Thanks,
dangerous work,
firefighters.
falling, slipping, cutting. There's a lot of sharp material from the fuselage and everything.
Firefighters quickly found the flight data recorder in good condition. It was taken to Washington for analysis to find out exactly what was going on board Flight 587 as it was crashing to the ground in Queens.
Because the crash took place only 2 months after the attacks against New York and the World Trade Center, it was easy for everyone to assume that this was another politically motivated attack against either the U.S. government or U.S. civilians. But those rumors and assumptions were dashed immediately. The NTSB investigation that occurred immediately after this crash was able to easily prove that this was just a freak accident, that all of the loss of life was unintentional and the direct result of occurrences that were out of anyone's control. The victims of this event were mostly passengers of the plane. In total, 265 people lost their lives in this unfortunate event, 5 of those people being on the ground. Those 5 people were either in their homes or on the street when this passenger airplane suddenly fell out the sky.
I'm not even trying to be funny, but can you imagine just minding your own business and a whole ass airplane just hits you and kills you? You don't even have control over it. It just literally comes out of nowhere and just murks you and takes you out of the gene pool.
Entering a flat spin.
That is horrible luck.
New York. This is Fan Mei Yi. She was born in 1976 in Shenzhen, China, and her life was not easy. She was abandoned by her family as a child, resulting in her being raised in an all-girls orphanage. And when she turned 15, she was told to leave the orphanage because they had an age restriction. And from that point, she was homeless. And like many who live on the street, unfortunately, she became addicted to drugs. And after a while, she needed to feed that addiction. And being uneducated and a teenager, Fan Mei Yi only had one option to make any sort of money. She began selling her body, specifically to support her methamphetamine addiction. Along with selling her body at night, she would also participate in petty crime to get any sort of money to feed her addiction. It wouldn't be until she was 21 when she was taken in by a brothel.
Man, it has to suck having to try to get out of that cycle.
And right around the same time, she would meet her future husband. He was a frequent customer of hers, and his name was Ng Chen Yuen. Ng was a drug addict and an abuser. Once they were married, the abuse only got worse, and many of Fan and
how the hell did they get married?
Would note how loud their apartment was, and how every night there would be sounds of abuse. This would be Fan's life all of 1996, all the way up until 1997, when she would meet another person named Chan Man Look. They would meet and converse only because he was a customer of Fan. Chan Man Look was 34 years old, and he was a socialite. He would frequently spend money with Fan and also do methamphetamine with her, with many of these meth binges lasting days. During one of the many binges that Fan had with Chan, she noticed that Chan would leave his wallet out during their sessions together, so she chose to steal that wallet. And to her surprise and the surprise of her husband, she had stolen $4,000. Quickly, Fan realized the severity of her actions and attempted to pay Chan back. She gave him most of her earnings from working at the brothel to pay him back, on top of giving Chan $10,000. And from there, she thought the transaction was done. She thought that she was able to repair the damages. But unfortunately, she was unaware as to why Chan was a socialite and why Chan had access to illegal drugs and copious amounts of money. It was because he was a loan shark, and he wanted interest on top of the money that she stole. Fan would also learn that on top of being a loan shark, Chan was a major drug dealer, specifically for the Triads, which was and still is a large criminal organization in Hong Kong. A year later, on March 17th, 1999, Chan decided that Fan needed to be dealt with. He felt disrespected after being stolen from. So Chan ordered 2 members of the Triads, Luang Sheng Cho and Luang Wei Lun, to abduct Fan from her home and commit some of the worst acts of violence against her imaginable. Some time had passed since Fan seen Chang in person. At this point of her life in 1999, she had quit drugs and had divorced her husband.
Okay, I'm not condoning of thievery. Yeah, she shouldn't have stole the money, but holy crap, I'm only imagining what they did to her, which I mean, coming from gang members, yeah, you probably know where I'm thinking of. For $4,000, yeah, that's a lot of money, but holy shit, she didn't, like, kill anybody or abduct anybody or whatever. She literally stole money, like, right? She could just pay it back. She shouldn't have done it. Again, not a correct thing for her to do, but again, she could literally just paid it back. That is overkill.
Find some legitimate work outside of the brothel, but her life was still incredibly difficult. She was still incredibly poor, looking for work outside of selling her body, and this left her alone and vulnerable to what was about to happen. The 2 Triad gang members would abduct Fan from her apartment and then quickly transported her to Chan's apartment on Granville Road in Hong Kong. The apartment had 5 bedrooms and was completely covered in Hello Kitty products, such as bed sheets, curtains, stuffed toys. These decorations were put up to soothe Fan's mind, to make her feel comfortable, because the plan was to force her to work at the brothel until she paid off her debt. A debt that would never be fully repaid. It would continue to increase as long as she was working under Chan. But this was only the plan. What actually happened to Fan was even worse. The 2 gang members and a 13-year-old girl decided that Fan would be better as a punching as she was working under Chan.
How old was she?
This was only the plan. What actually happened to Fan was even worse. The 2 gang members and a 13-year-old girl decided that Fan would be better as a punching bag. They had fun in torturing her. They used every sadistic method of torture that they could imagine against her. And one of the individuals who was torturing her probably didn't have a choice. The 13-year-old girl who participated in this gruesome torture was brought in by Luang Wei Lun, and this grown man was
forced that 13-year-old to torture
this 13-year-old girl. She would periodically come in and out of the apartment to help torture Fan. During her imprisonment, she was tortured and assaulted. According to one source, she was beaten with metal bars, sometimes being strung up and used as a punching bag, and on one occasion, she was kicked in the head 50 times. Spices were rubbed into Fan's wounds, her legs and feet were burned with candle wax and hot plastic. Specifically, after the candle wax and hot plastic, she was left permanently maimed to such an extent that she couldn't walk anymore. And if that wasn't already terrible, she was then forced to consume human waste and was forced to smile and say that she enjoyed the beatings. If she refused, they subjected her to even harsher torture. Specifically, the kitchen in the apartment became the torturer's favorite place to find anything they could to inflict pain. Every tool, every utensil, anything that you can find in a kitchen, they used on Fan. One of the ways that they burned her with plastic was by melting drinking straws and dripping the melted plastic on her legs and feet. And to reiterate, they did this because they just wanted to. They did this because they found it funny. Over time, Fan would become more and more weak as the torture became more and more severe. And between April 14th and April 15th of 1999, Fan succumbed to her wounds and died of traumatic shock. Upon the discovery of Fan's body, her captors dismembered and boiled the remains. Her skull was sewed inside of a Hello Kitty doll filled with dead insects, while the rest of her body was discarded. Only her skull, one tooth, and some internal organs were recovered. They were found in a plastic bag. The Triad members thought they got away with it. They thought that nobody would look for someone who has no
that is creepy. That looks like
living on this
that looks like
life.
That dead ass looks like just, you know, like a Hello Kitty. That looks like a really innocent thing, like, yeah, whatever. But the fact there's a human remains inside that is just unnerving. Wow, that's actually that's a shithead move.
The 13-year-old girl felt guilty. She felt scared, specifically of a spirit, Fan Mei Yi's spirit. She was being haunted by this woman, a woman that she helped kill. And that's what motivated her to go to the police and reveal everything. And that's exactly how the police discovered the Hello Kitty doll that had Fan Mei Yi's head sewed inside of it. It wouldn't be long until the police officers tracked down the gang members and Chang for this murder. 8-year-old girl, who was only named as Lau, gave up everything. At the time of the arrest, Chan was living with his wife, Ah Pui. The apartment was raided by SWAT officers on the early morning hours of May 28th.
That's good.
Chan was immediately arrested, but
raided.
the 2 other gang members were already out of China. But they would be found quickly by Interpol and extradited back.
Yes, Interpol, let's go. Let's go. I love Interpol. They kick ass. W, those guys help find vicious criminals and predators and bring them to justice. I love Interpol. Interpol needs to get a pat on the back.
It wouldn't be until December 7, 2000 when the trial actually began, and it was a quick affair. They were all found guilty of manslaughter. This was because the jury was not unanimous in their opinion about whether or not this was actually murder. A few members of the jury believed that she only died of a drug overdose and not of torture, with arguments
they tortured her!
They didn't mean to kill her, they only meant to keep her alive to continue.
No. These guys deserve to get the book chucked in them as hard as they can.
She testified in court about what happened, and she told the entire story with all of the details. During the trial, Chang and Luang Xingqiu denied killing Fan, although they did not deny dismembering her body. Chan's wife also knew about the torture, and she also
had intent to harm her.
And after all of the arguments were made and all the testimonies were given, the 3 men involved in this deplorable act were found guilty, and they were sentenced to life in prison without the chance of
Oh my god.
Before the 3 men
it is lucky they avoided the death penalty. I mean, I know it's not America, but still.
Never in Hong Kong in recent years has a court heard of such cruelty, depravity, callousness,
that is
brutality,
vicious.
violence, and viciousness. These men were completely remorseless.
Yeah, those dudes are some of the worst people I physically have ever heard about. Like, they're not humans, they're monsters. Like, to call them I'm not even gonna say, I'm sorry. But no, to call them a human is an insult to humans. The fact that they were that remorseless and ended the life of a poor young girl shows what type of people they are. They're sadistic, vile, disgusting people. That is sad.
The Google Earth program was released in 2001, and many people are familiar with its utility. I'm sure many of us became aware of the program when we were children, and the first thing we did was search it for a home. There's something incredibly fascinating about seeing a home, something that you are familiar with, in a whole new perspective. Now imagine if on a random day while searching on Google Earth, you found something odd in your neighborhood. Something so out of place, yet you wouldn't be able to see it if you didn't have
Okay, which is it? Is it the blood on the deck? Is it the car in the water in Florida? Which one's it going to be?
If you didn't have the bird's eye view. On September
Yup, it's the car.
A Florida resident
discovered
that there was a car submerged in a lake in their backyard.
A guy literally drove in and he got hidden for years, and then they finally found him.
He solved a 22-year-old disappearance case. In November of 1997, a man named William Molt went missing. He was 40 years old at the time, and his disappearance was incredibly sudden. His girlfriend was actually expecting him to come home that night. Instead, she came home to an empty house. And it wouldn't be until 22 years later that his car was pulled out of this lake and his skeletal remains were recovered. Police officers and investigators were able to piece together what happened. Apparently, William Molt had driven into the lake by accident and unfortunately drowned. And because his disappearance was so sudden back in 1997, his case was shelved. There simply wasn't enough information to seek out any leads that would help in his discovery. And the most interesting thing about this event is that if the conditions weren't right, if this Florida resident didn't use Google Earth, coupled with the fact that the lake in his backyard was actually shallow due to a lack of rain, William Molt's body would have never been discovered. His car would have never been seen, and his family would have never received closure.
At least those guys did achieve closure.
This is your conventional parachute. It's a device used to slow down the motion of an object through an atmosphere by creating drag, or aerodynamic lift. People who use this device are typically those who skydive or base jump, and most of the time, the parachute works, especially if it's used properly. For example, if you were to open up your parachute too late, it will deploy, but at a low altitude, there's simply not enough time for the parachute to capture enough air to slow down your fall. And many people have broken their limbs or lost their lives because of an improper use of a parachute. But that's within your control. As long as you know how to use a parachute, you should be fine. But what's the likelihood of a parachute not functioning properly? You see, the likelihood of that happening varies from brand to brand. So the industry standard is to pack 2 parachutes, your main and your reserve, so that in the instance that your main parachute fails, tangles, or tears, you have a backup that will save your life. But to be clear, that backup chute still needs to be deployed at the right altitude. And unfortunately for this man, he simply did not have enough time for the reserve parachute to save his life. This is Nathan Odinson, and he was a recreational skydiver and base jumper in Thailand. And on January 29th, 2024, he decided to do another base jumping stunt in Thailand. He wanted to jump off a 29-story building, all while having the stunt filmed by his friend who would jump right behind him. The video begins with Nathan Odinson smiling and checking all of his equipment before jumping off the building.
Hey, his friend probably recorded his death, didn't he?
Stunt ever performed in Thailand. In the video, you can hear Odinson striking a tree and then striking the ground immediately after he jumped off the building. Quickly after striking the ground, his friend called the police and the paramedics pronounced him dead at the scene. An investigation into the tragic incident has been launched, and police suggested that the parachute merely malfunctioned, while Odinson's brother blamed user error. Odinson's brother would go into detail about what he thought went wrong. He said it was simple user error. Looking at the video, any skydiver would immediately tell you what is wrong. He would go into detail about how the pilot chute was thrown improperly, which caused Odinson's chute to not open properly. You see, the pilot chute is meant to catch the air and guide the main chute to make sure that all of the air could be captured and you could safely float to the ground. Nathan Odinson did not have enough time after jumping off the building to deploy his second chute. After the main chute failed, Nathan Odinson was already halfway down the length of the building, giving him almost no time to deploy the second chute, and when he hit the ground, he died instantly.
At least there is no suffering.
It's the most present molecule in our atmosphere, the 7th most prevalent element in our solar system, and it's colorless and odorless. Those are the descriptors of the element nitrogen. Humanity has been able to utilize this element in many, many ways. One of the most notable ways that we use nitrogen is in fertilizer, and is wholeheartedly the reason why there's nearly 8.2 billion people on this planet. But in the realm of chemical engineering, elements like nitrogen have multiple uses, both positive and negative. And recently there's been a new use found for nitrogen. And this man, Kenneth Eugene Smith, has become the first test case to prove the utility of nitrogen hypoxia. Historically, the United States penal system would have multiple different
I'm about to say, that face looks very familiar.
Firing squad, electrocution, lethal injection, and
oh yeah, right, the five execution. I don't know why I know this. Yeah, again, it says firing squad, gas chamber, lethal injection. I think a pill, and then it's hanging. Hanging, firing squad, electrical chair, lethal injection, and gas chamber.
Of course, gas penal system would have multiple different ways of capital punishment, whether that be hanging, a firing squad, electrocution, lethal injection, and of course, inert gas asphyxiation.
Oh, I think a few have been discontinued.
Is how Kenneth Eugene Smith was executed. They used inert gas asphyxiation. It's a form of asphyxiation that results from breathing in a physiologically inert gas in absence of oxygen, or a low amount of oxygen.
Although it is shocking, to a certain degree, the U.S. has gas chambers to execute prisoners on death row.
Since 1995, many people have been pushing for this type of execution, specifically with nitrogen. Many believe it to be more humane than a lethal injection or electrocution, and it wouldn't be until recently, as of January 25th, that somebody would actually be executed with this method. And the first person to have the opportunity to experience this way of death is Kenneth Eugene Smith. He was born July 4th, 1965 in Alabama, and he's a murderer. On March 18th, 1988, Kenneth Eugene Smith was paid $1,000 to kill a woman. Her name was Elizabeth Sennett, and she was found with fatal injuries in her home in Colbert County, Alabama. Kenneth and another man broke into her home and murdered her. They then trashed her home to make it look like a home invasion and left. When the police entered her home, they noticed that it wasn't a typical home invasion and absolutely was a cover-up. But there wasn't really any evidence of Kenneth being there, and the police were running out of leads, until someone anonymously called them through Crime Stoppers saying that Kenneth and another man were responsible for this woman's murder. A search warrant would be put out for Kenneth, and once they searched his house, they found a voice recorder that was stolen from Elizabeth's home. From there, Kenneth was arrested, charged, and found guilty of murder. The judge specifically gave him the death sentence because he was a murderer for hire, and he would remain on death row for a long time, appealing his case, attempting to stay the execution. But on November 17th, 2022, his attempts at preventing his inevitable death failed, and his first execution attempt occurred. But this execution attempt was botched. He was going to receive the lethal injection, but they couldn't find the vein to inject. They ended up damaging his collarbone, and because of that, his execution was postponed to a later date. That date being January 25th, 2024, when coincidentally, nitrogen asphyxiation as an execution method was finally allowed in the state of Alabama, and Kenneth's execution was overdue. So they picked him to be the first person in Alabama to be executed with this method. The nitrogen gas was administered for 15 minutes, and Smith was officially pronounced dead around 25 minutes. It appeared death occurred around 10 to 15 minutes following the administration of the gas. When movement of Smith ceased at 8:08 p.m., 11 minutes following the activation of the nitrogen hypoxia system, some witnesses commented that Smith looked as if he was conscious for several minutes and thrashed violently on the gurney, breathing heavily for several minutes before breathing was no longer visible, and he was later pronounced dead.
Can you imagine the people that have to like go in and remove the bodies from death row people? That has to be one of the most, like, even though they're like, you know, arguably bad people to a certain degree. Hell, good or bad, having to see a body, like a dead person, again, no matter what crime they commit, has to be one of the most scarring experiences. Man, that job, I don't know, they may get paid good for that job. They may not only just get money, but a whole lot of mental anguish. This one's number 22. Morbid Reality 22.
Is a vast place. Nearly any question that comes to mind can be answered with a simple keystroke. Any curiosity can be quelled with a simple search term. And yet, when we hit enter and look upon the very answer we sought out to find, many of us experience a very peculiar kind of cognitive dissonance. The answer you sought out is grotesque and disturbing. And yet, you can't look away, and you don't know why. It's almost like coming to grips with our morbid reality is a task fit for no one. Located on the southeast of the Sinai Peninsula, a few kilometers north of Dahab, Egypt.
Egypt, yup.
Hole.
That I know exactly what this hole is. I think that is a blue hole. It is responsible for claiming the deaths or claiming the lives of multiple divers. It is what's called the diver graveyard.
Marine sinkhole with a maximum depth of just over 328 feet. And because of that fact, because of its depth, the sinkhole has become a tourist destination where many scuba divers challenge themselves to freedive inside of the blue hole. And for many, it's an unforgettable experience. But unfortunately for a few, it became their last experience. And one of those people is named Yuri Lipsky. Yuri Lipsky was a Russian-Israeli freediver and scuba diver, and he was relatively skilled. In his opinion, he felt that he was capable of freediving the blue hole, with one specific goal that he had in mind. He wanted to break his depth record, and the sinkhole was just...
I think this guy was like a freaking nutter, dude. Like, this guy was like really good at what he did, and he still succumbed to this sinkhole.
Immediately into the water and descending as quickly as he could, reaching a maximum depth that he hadn't reached before, and then rapidly swimming back up to not use up all of his air. This strategy to break his depth record was dangerous, to say the least, and Yuri Lipsky was advised that he should train before attempting to rapidly break his depth record. 2 weeks were set aside for his training before he would visit the blue hole. He decided to not show up. He simply didn't have enough time. He only had the weekend to freedive the blue hole, so he chose to skip the training altogether. So on April 28th, 2000, Yuri Lipsky put on his scuba gear, filled one tank with a mixture of oxygen and nitrogen, and once that was complete, he turned on his camera that was attached to his helmet, and from there, he jumped into the blue hole. From there, his camera captured everything. Yuri Lipsky was traveling really fast in the water, sinking as quickly as possible, and reached a maximum depth of 91 meters. Whether or not this broke his record is unknown. What is known is that he was diving alone and overweighted. His equipment, his camera, all of it were keeping him underwater. He tried to rapidly resurface, but over time he became more and more disoriented. This was because he had improperly mixed the gases in his tank. He had one tank of oxygen and nitrogen, and the mix was not balanced. His tank contained mostly oxygen, and because of the extreme pressure of being under 91 meters of water, Yuri Lipsky was beginning to succumb to oxygen toxicity, along with nitrogen narcosis because of how little nitrogen was in his tank. Over the course of minutes, it wouldn't be long until Yuri Lipsky was at the very bottom of the blue hole. He was thrashing against the rocks and sand, obviously disoriented.
Oh yeah, he had his last moments recorded.
He would become motionless. That was the moment when Yuri Lipsky drowned to death, at the bottom of the blue hole. His body wouldn't be recovered until a day later, and the unfortunate truth is, he's the lucky one. Of all the people to die in the blue hole, very few have actually had their bodies recovered. The other 200 are still at the bottom of the sinkhole.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's scary. Interesting as a video on that. I like that channel.
It's odorless, it's tasteless, and when weaponized, it can be aerosolized.
Is that mustard gas?
It can be mixed into dirt, and it can be mixed into water. And if you had the grave misfortune of encountering this compound, you would experience immediate and permanent paralysis. The dangerous compound in question is simply called VX. It's a synthetic chemical compound that was created in the 1950s, and it's known to be the most deadly synthetic chemical that humanity has ever created. So dangerous, in fact, that most governments don't have it. They actually destroyed their stockpiles because they were so dangerous.
I think I've heard about it.
To truly put forward the dangerousness of this chemical, most developed nations with developed governments will maintain their nuclear arsenal before they would maintain their VX arsenal. As of this year, VX has never been used in a military conflict. But yet, it's still been used on people, just individuals. And today I'm going to tell you the story of one of the rare times that VX was used against another human. But before I start that, let me explain to you what VX truly does to your body. You see, VX is not your typical nerve agent. It's the nerve agent. When 1/10 of a milligram of VX is inhaled, it begins to react with the chemicals that regulate your nervous system. The VX molecule is pretty large and pretty reactive. It either connects or destroys anything that it touches, and most of those compounds are associated with your nervous system, making it difficult for you to move anything, including your diaphragm. So many people who are exposed to VX quickly choke, then collapse onto the ground, and then while completely conscious and awake, realize quickly that they can't breathe on their own, and then they suffocate to death.
Oh, man.
This is Kim Jong-nam, the paternal half.
I think I know about this story. It's like one
on May 10th, 1971.
The North Korean time was assassinated.
One of 4 women known to have had children with Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-nam would study in Moscow for most of his childhood, and he reportedly had a similar personality to his father, and was described by his aunt as being hot-tempered, sensitive, and gifted in the arts. His aunt also said in 2000 that he did not wish to succeed his father. Like Kim Jong-il, he was interested in film. He wrote scripts and short films from a young age, and his father also created a small movie set for him to use. Things would begin to change for Kim Jong-nam between the years of 1998 and 2001. This was a point of his life where he was given a lot of responsibilities within the North Korean government. He had been given the senior position in the Ministry of Public Security, and also a senior position in the North Korean Computer Committee, where he was given the goal of establishing an IT industry within the nation. By the year 2001 came around, things started to get a little bit messy for Kim Jong-nam. He was caught in Japan with a fake Chinese passport, and this was embarrassing for him. His father would come to find out that he was caught in Japan with a fake passport, and the reason why he was there wasn't for any legitimate government work, but to visit Tokyo Disneyland. This moment was very embarrassing for not only his father, but for the entire North Korean nation, and it led to some decisions being made about who was going to run the nation next after Kim Jong-il passed away. The entire Kim family and most of the North Korean government began to focus on Kim Jong-nam's half-brother, Kim Jong-un. Over the course of the early 2000s, Kim Jong-un would become more and more familiar with the inner workings of the North Korean government, with the fullest expectation that he would be given power. Kim Jong-nam, on the other hand, didn't really fight this. He understood that he was too young and too inexperienced to actually have power in the nation, and at that point he had been exiled from North Korea because he had shared some thoughts and ideologies that were aligned with capitalism as opposed to communism. It wouldn't be until 2012 when Kim Jong-nam wrote a book titled My Father Kim Jong-il and Me. This book detailed his life and his upbringing and why he was not the leader of North Korea. He mentioned how he never really had interest in becoming a leader and understood that he didn't have the skills or background necessary to really control the nation. But he also voiced his concerns about how the nation was run and how North Korea itself is in dire need of some serious reforms. This book and Kim Jong-nam's behavior outside of North Korea made North Korean officials a little nervous. With Kim Jong-nam being Kim Jong-il's son and voicing his opinions that are diametrically opposite to those of his father's, wasn't a good look. So on February 13th, 2017,
sorry for the mysterious, weird gunshots to the back of your head, dude.
Decided to do something about his brother's behavior. Kim Jong-nam had a flight, and he arrived in Malaysia on February 6, 2017. He was traveling to a resort
about the icebox his ass.
and for the meantime, he was safe, staying there. And it wouldn't be until the 13th of February, at about 9 a.m., when he was approached by two women, one of whom was Vietnamese, while the other was Indonesian. While walking to the self-checkout desk at the Kuala Lumpur airport, these two women approached him and ambushed him with VX. They sprayed it in his face, and within moments he was choking, sputtering, and quickly losing control of his limbs and his balance. And from there, he would collapse onto a lounge chair, and his diaphragm would stop working. He would only have a few minutes left of life before he completely suffocated to death. With his
that is a horrible way to die.
In a very awkward position.
VX, I'm so glad it's not used.
His arms are splayed out. He was taken to the hospital, but that was where he was pronounced dead. He was not alive for the entire trip. The two women who were involved were quickly identified and captured. Both were charged with the murder of Kim Jong-nam, but oddly enough, their murder charges were dropped and changed to a lesser charge of voluntarily causing hurt by dangerous weapons or means, and received a sentence of 3 years and 4 months. The two women were released from prison in 2019. There was a large international reaction to this very blatant assassination, and from there, many governments' intelligence organizations were doing their own investigations as to why Kim Jong-un did this, with the United States concluding that actually Kim Jong-nam may have been killed not because of his personal ideologies, but because of who he was working with when he was staying in the United States. Allegedly, Kim Jong-nam was a CIA informant who was being paid $120,000 a year to give up information on the Kim family and the inner workings of the North Korean government. Located in the countryside of Colombia is the small town of Armero. And as of 2005, 12,000 people had lived there. And these people have suffered a lot of pain trying to stay in this spot because it's at the foot of a very active volcano. Nevado del Ruiz is a large stratovolcano
that's a big-ass volcano.
With its first eruption taking place over 150,000 years ago. The volcano usually generates Vulcan to Pallinian eruptions. This leads to the creation of pyroclastic flows, which is a mix of hot gases and rocks that will pour down the side of the mountain.
Like Mount St. Helens
Following
style.
that pyroclastic flow is a lahar, which consists of water, trees, rocks, mud, dissolved gases, and any living being that was picked up by the fast-moving water and mud. This occurs because the mountain is typically covered in glaciers, and when a volcanic eruption occurs, all of that water melts, and immediately the water cascades down the mountain, washing everything out of its way. And that's exactly what happened on November 13th, 1985. By September of 1985, seismic measurements had been taken at the base of the mountain, and the tremors were significant. Many of the townspeople knew that another eruption was imminent, and immediate evacuation was mandatory. It wouldn't be until less than a month later that the eruption occurred. It was small, but it melted 5 to 10% of the ice cap that covered the top of the mountain. And from that, it triggered a serious lahar, running at the speed of roughly 25 miles per hour.
It looks like Mount St. Helens when it eroded. The entire half the mountainside just
heavy sludge
turned to liquid.
Buried instantly. Houses were destroyed and buried completely. While some people were lucky enough to only suffer injuries, most of the townspeople perished. As many as 25,000 people died. And unfortunately, many of them did not have an instant death. A lot of them weren't buried completely. Many of them were trapped under debris and forced to live many days in freezing water. And the name of one
I
of
think
those
I've seen this.
souls
I've heard about the story about this
Omira
girl.
Sanchez.
Yeah, this
Omira
girl who had
Sanchez lived in the
she
neighborhood
kept
of Santander,
holding on.
located in Omira. She lived with her parents.
They even gave her a tire to float on, but she
Olivero
didn't
every
make
day,
it.
And her mother was named
Rest in
Maria
peace to this
Alita.
girl.
They were both sorghum farmers, and they worked diligently to support
Sorghum.
Omira and her brother, Olivero. And everything in their lives seemed relatively normal until November 13th. The night of the disaster, the entire family, including Omira's aunt, were in the home, and they were very much awake. They were concerned about the lahar, not necessarily the eruption, and that was because there was a noticeable accumulation of glacier ice on top of the mountain. The family knew that there was going to be a devastating flood, and there was nothing that they could do about it. And once it hit, Omira became trapped under the home's concrete and other debris and couldn't free herself. Fortunately, though, her head and shoulders were still above water, and she was able to scream until someone noticed her and got help. The rescuers tried to help her, but they realized her legs were trapped under the house's roof. which
Yeah,
was
they
dead
couldn't
on
get her out.
tightly clutched around her. And while all of this is happening, a photojournalist named Frank Fournier arrived in Bogota, and this was 2 days after the eruption happened. At this point, Omira had been in the water for 48 hours, and she was starting to show signs of hypothermia and gangrene. You see, the photojournalist, Frank Fournier, wanted to take pictures of the aftermath of this eruption. It had become international news when people found out that this eruption, a small eruption,
Yeah, I've seen that
had managed
photo
to kill
before. It's the girl
25,000
looking in the
people.
picture. Her
And Frank
eyes are
was there
almost
to
black.
take pictures of all of the gore and destruction. And by the time Fournier had reached Sanchez, she had been exposed to the elements for too long. And there was nothing that anyone could do to help her. She was just too stuck. The most that people could do was give her water and food and try their best to make sure that she was warm and comfortable. But it wasn't working. She was slowly succumbing to hypothermia. This was because, on the third night, Sanchez began hallucinating, saying that she didn't want to be late for school, and mentioned a math exam. Near the end of her life, Sanchez's eyes reddened, and her face swelled, her hands whitened, and at one point she asked the people to leave her so that she could rest. They did, and they took it as an opportunity to find something that could truly help her. Hours later, they returned with a pump, but they didn't realize just how bad her legs were. You see, she was bent and pinned under concrete in a weird kneeling position. Even if the water was properly drained, they would still need to remove the debris.
Which would be a pain in the ass to do.
And of course, there was the reality that maybe her legs were unsalvageable, and the rescue workers had no surgical equipment to address that. So everyone around her, in agreement, decided to just make her comfortable until things ended. And within a few hours after that, she did die, succumbing to hypothermia and gangrene on November 16th at 10:05 a.m. Her brother managed to survive the lahars, her father and aunt died, and her mother was also able to survive. She expressed her feelings about Omira's death, quoted saying, "It's horrible, but we have to think about the living. I will live for my son, who only lost a finger." Torture and execution have been a part of human society since the beginning of time. Criminals have been punished in ways unimaginable, with methods and tools that are frighteningly creative. Personally, the type of execution devices that I find fascinating are those that are meant for a specific population, or those that are designed to bring out a confession. And one of the devices that I'm going to be sharing with you today is named the garrote. This device can both be used as an assassination weapon and an execution device. So what is a garrote? What does it do? Well, it all depends on what the garrote is made out of. It can be made with different materials, including ropes, cloth, cable ties, fishing lines, nylon, guitar strings, telephone cord, or piano wire. A stick may be used to tighten the garrote, and the Spanish word refers to the stick itself. In Spanish, the term may also refer to a rope and stick used to constrict a limb as a torture device. So here's a breakdown of how a garrote would be used against you if you were an unfortunate criminal or a heretic being investigated during the Spanish Inquisition. You would be told to sit down on this wooden device, and a rope would be wrapped around your neck, tied in a way that there would be a gap in the knot for a stick to be placed through. And from then on, the executioner would slowly tighten the knot by twisting the stick clockwise. The motion of the stick twisting behind you would cause the rope on your neck to tighten. And if you didn't answer any questions or confess to a crime, you would be killed that way. The rope would strangle. But this is only one method. Sometimes the rope is wire, and sometimes there is no rope or wire at all. If you're one of the unfortunate people to be sat down in front of a metal garrote, you would be told to sit down, and then your neck would be latched into the garrote, where you might feel a little bump or spike at the base of your neck. You see, as the executioner twists the bump behind you, that spike puts pressure on the back of your neck. And will eventually end your
Dude,
life.
some sadistic asshole had to be laughing in this freaking dungeon when he created that thing.
That occurred during the Spanish Inquisition. If you, for example, were steadfast in saying that you weren't a heretic, and the claims brought against you by the church and by others were false, there would have been a likelihood of you encountering this machine.
I guess screw loves thy neighbor.
Pain and suffocation would encourage you to repent your sins and admit to heresy.
Big deal.
This is a photograph of a British blacksmith removing the leg irons off of a slave in 1907. And this photograph is one of few that depict the realities of the Arab slave trade, specifically the Indian Ocean slave trade. East African peoples would be captured in raids and then sold along the East African coastline. From there, these East African slaves would be dropped off in India and Java. Some of these slaves would also end up in the Caribbean, but by 1907, slavery of that nature was illegal, at least in the Western world. But in the Middle East and the Arab world, it was incredibly legal, to such an extent that many British Navy ships would go out of their way to rescue slaves and free them. One of those Navy ships was named the HMS Sphinx, and the man responsible for taking these photos was named Joseph Chidwick, and he was born in 1881. And when asked about the situation that led to this photo being taken, Chidwick had this to say: "The pictures were taken while I was serving aboard the HMS Sphinx, and while on an armed patrol off the Zanzibar and Mozambique coast in about 1907, we caught quite a few slavers, and those particular slaves that are in the pictures happened while I was on watch. That night, a dhow, an Arab sailing vessel, sailed by, and the slaves were all chained together. I raised the alarm and got them onto the ship and got the chains knocked off of them. They then questioned them and sent a party of Marines ashore to try and track the slave traders down. They appeared to be of Arabic origin." Joseph Chidwick would then go into detail about his feelings concerning slavery. "I thought it was a despicable thing that was going on. The slaves were treated very badly. So when we captured the slavers,
absolute W, hero that we all
at this time,
didn't
the Royal
deserve,
Navy
but we got
East Africa and West Africa for any slave trading. And between the years of 1808 and 1860, the British Navy was
It's sad they saw their own people to slavery.
150,000 enslaved
At least sometimes they
Africans, most
do.
of which were
Or
going to
I
the
think they
Caribbean
did.
or to Brazil. But even in 1907, there was still a problem. East African slave trading was still an issue, but not as much as it was in the past. And over time, the British Navy became just too much of a nuisance for the Arab slave traders to make money or just outright participate in slavery. And this man, Joseph Chidwick, captured the moment in which humanity said, "No more. We will no longer support the
absolute W.
enslavement of others, especially for economic gain." And something about this photo, even though it is morbid, it contains an air of optimism and hope.
Let's go, absolute hero. I hope that guy gets all the beer he wants.
Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's
same guy
of the r/Morbid Reality series. I know many of you guys...
Morbid Reality, Alien...
The internet is...
The rest, what's number 15?
The million... Fit for no one. July 28th, 1914 marks the beginning of one of the world's deadliest global conflicts. World War I, or at the time known as the Great War, would take the lives of approximately 14 million people, 9 million soldiers, and 5 million civilians. And unfortunately, many would lose their lives in one place, the Western Front. Following the outbreak of war in August of 1914, the German army opened the Western Front by invading Luxembourg and Belgium, then gaining military control of important industrial regions in France. And both the German and French offensives were so strong.
I don't really know too much about World War I.
Literally entrenched themselves.
Except for it was in the very early 20th century.
Meandering trenches that stretched from the North Sea.
And trench warfare. I do know a bit about trench warfare though.
And between 1915 and
it was bad. You would be vibing out in your trench, and then some asshat over by the German army. Again, I'm not insulting Germans today. This saying German army back then, not today. But some German just lobs a freaking mustard gas can and it floods the, floods the trenches because mustard gas, it's denser than air, so it's gonna sink. And guess what? It's gonna sink into those trenches and it's going to utterly murder everybody who breathes it in. If you don't, man, actually, if you get murdered by mustard gas, you're getting the easy way out. Those that have to survive and go through the torture experience a new kind of hell.
1917, there were several offenses along this front. Both sides utilized massive artillery bombardments, along with sporadic infantry advances that were supported with machine gun cover fire. This method of gaining territory in the Western Front was nearly Sisyphean. Among the most costly of these offenses were the Battle of Verdun in 1916, where 700,000 soldiers died, gaining zero territory. This number would be dwarfed in the same year during the Battle of the Somme, where more than 1 million soldiers died. However, during the Battle of the Somme, one soldier survived. His name was Percy Dell Smith, born in 1882. He arrived on the Western Front in late 1916, and he was a Royal Marine.
Yeah, that's where shell shock came from.
Bombardment, Percy would be drawing. His sketches were
Man, can you
surroundings, and even though he only used pencil and paper, he managed to depict the horrors of the Battle of the Somme. A common character would appear in many of his drawings, the Grim Reaper. This character would either be welcoming or denying the lost souls that would be on the battlefield. The images that stick out to me the most aren't his depictions of the death and violence during this battle, but the mundane, plain actions of soldiers within the trench. This image of soldiers walking with pickaxes really sticks out to me because it seems so aimless. It really makes you think about how these people felt. These people knew that the next day they could potentially lose their lives, only to gain a foot of territory.
What a waste of human life.
This is Alicia Esteve Head, born July 3rd, 1973. She was born in Barcelona, Spain, and she came from a prominent family that was involved in a 1992 financial scandal for which her father and brother served prison terms. She would go on to attend the University of Barcelona and leave with a master's degree in business management. The skills that she learned at the University of Barcelona would come in handy. When interviewed, she said her master's degree in business management gave her the opportunity to work at the World Trade Center in 2001. Her role was a business management secretary, and on September 11, 2001, Alicia Head claimed that she'd been inside of the South Tower when United Airlines Flight 175 hit. She managed to survive by crawling through the smoke and flames on the 78th floor, all while sustaining severe burns to her arms. Her story resonated with many people, so she decided to join the World Trade Center Survivors Network and also managed to develop an online support group for 9/11 survivors. And within these support groups, her story was galvanizing. She would even go on to mention that her fiance Dave was killed in the North Tower, and during her escape from the South Tower, a dying man gave her a wedding ring that was meant to be given to his wife. Alicia had received lots of press over this, and as a result, her story received a lot of scrutiny. In September of 2007, the New York Times sought to verify key details of Alicia Head's story as a part of an anniversary piece. You see, Alicia Head recently claimed that she received a degree from Harvard University and a graduate business degree from Stanford University, but both of these institutions had no record of her attending. She also claimed that she had been working at Merrill Lynch in the South Tower, but Merrill Lynch had no record of her employment. Nor did Merrill Lynch have offices in the World Trade Center at the time of the attacks.
Dude, what an actual lying asshole.
Alicia Head, she would reject
abusing the freaking tragedy of 9/11 just for fame.
Clear that her 9/11
wow,
story
you suck.
And she told these false stories simply for attention.
You
the New York
suck.
Times would go on to contact other members of the Survivor Network when raising questions about the veracity of Alicia Head's story. And by the end of 2007, the Survivor Network refused any additional interviews with the New York Times and removed Alicia Head as president and director of the group.
Good job.
It's been over 2 decades since her lie has been exposed, and she's vanished from the public eye.
Good.
The Independent made their own investigation trying to find out where she was, and they couldn't even verify her LinkedIn page. The aftermath of everyone finding out about her false story left many people hollow. Why would someone lie about being a part of such a traumatic event? Many people assumed it was for money and for fame, but she did all of this voluntarily. She never received a dime for her work with the Survivor Network, and she never received payment for any interview done with a major news organization. The only explanation left is that she did this simply for attention.
Just wow.
Femicide is the act of killing a woman. And Mexico has the second highest rate of femicides within Latin America, with an average of 10.5 femicides committed every day. The states with the highest incidence of femicide are Veracruz, Nuevo Leon, Puebla, and Mexico City. Of these crimes, 3% are criminally investigated and 1% obtain convictions.
So basically, if you just go out and kill a woman in Mexico, I guess you only got like a 99. You only got like, you got a nice 99% chance of getting away. That's totally fair. Got it. Damn, those poor women that live in that state probably live in a state of constant fear and agony. I envy those people.
Ingrid Escamilla Barragás. Born in 1995, she was 25 years old and originally from Puebla. And this is Eric Rosas, 46, who worked as a civil engineer. And they had been a couple for 5 years. And it's important to note that before Eric and Ingrid got together, Eric was married. And the reason why he was no longer married is because his ex-wife divorced him over domestic abuse. And unfortunately, Eric would go on to abuse Ingrid. And unfortunately, this abuse would escalate on February 10th, 2020. The crime against Ingrid Escamilla occurred after an argument in which Eric Rosas went into a rage when questioned for drinking alcohol, which triggered a fight in which he received several slashes from Ingrid. Eric would then go on to stab Ingrid in the neck multiple times, killing her, then removed her skin and various organs in which he tried to flush down the toilet of his house. He didn't succeed in doing so, so he collected all of her organs, placed it into a green bag, and then discarded it onto the street. Eric's son, from his previous marriage, witnessed the entire murder and called his mother. And after hearing about this gruesome murder from her son, Eric's ex-wife called the police. The police would arrive at Eric's home and find Ingrid's body in the bathroom. Many crime scene photos would be taken, and Eric would be immediately arrested and would confess to the crime. And many would think this is where the story would end, but unfortunately, things would get worse. Somehow, popular tabloid newspapers in Mexico City received the gruesome crime scene photos and placed them on the front page of these newspapers. The articles written about this murder were sensationalist, and it made people upset. It seemed like no one cared that Ingrid Escamilla was a living person who was gruesomely murdered.
Can you imagine being a relative of that poor girl and then learning that the photos of your relative that you love is posted for everybody to see? That is disturbing.
The mayor of Mexico City, Claudia Sheinbaum, announced that the dissemination of the images would be sanctioned. Therefore, an internal investigation on 6 public servants who may have leaked the photographs of Escamilla was opened. The prosecutor of Mexico City, Ernesto Ramos, supported Sheinbaum and described the leak as an offense not only to the victim and her family, but an offense to society. This is Carol Lombard, born October 6, 1990.
Why does she look like Marilyn Monroe?
Actress, particularly noted for her energetic and often offbeat roles in screwball comedies, and is ranked 23rd on the list of greatest female stars of classic.
I felt like she'd be like a star or something. Like she looks like Monroe.
Very wealthy family. Though her parents were separated, it didn't.
Like she looks like a mixture between Monroe and
the influence that her father and mother had led to her having
Madonna.
an easy time entering Hollywood. The first ever film that she appeared in was called A Perfect Crime, that debuted in 1921. She was 12 years old when she played the lead role. Even though she had an easy time entering the film industry, her first movie didn't do too well. Between the ages of 12 and 16, Carole Lombard didn't see a lot of success. It wouldn't be until 1927 when she finally had her break. She began appearing in slapstick comedies. She had a serious talent for comedy, and she saw a lot of success in that space. And that talent and success led her to getting her first serious contract with Paramount, where she was getting paid $3,500 per week for the movies that she would appear in. Most of those films being screwball comedies, which was a subgenre of romantic movies that were more comedic. Most of her successful screwball comedies came out between the years of 1934 and 1935.
Oh, so they're like way back then. I thought it'd be like 1980s.
Her fame began to wane, and by this point she'd earned enough money where she didn't necessarily need to appear in a ton of films. Especially because during this time, she found a lot of joy raising war bonds for the war effort. And by the end of 1941, Carole Lombard managed to raise $2 million in defense bonds in one single evening. And that day, her party had initially been scheduled to return to Los
money. That's a lot of money.
But Lombard was eager to reach home more quickly and wanted to travel by air. Although her mother and her press agent were afraid of flying and insisted that the group follow the original travel plans. Lombard suggested that they flip a coin, they agreed, and Lombard won the toss. Unfortunately, though, the group would regret that decision. In the early morning hours of January 16, 1942, Lombard, her mother, and her press agent boarded a transcontinental and Western Air Douglas DST aircraft to return to California. After refueling in Las Vegas, TW-8 Flight 3 took off at 7:07 p.m. and crashed into Potosi Mountain. All 22 aboard, including Lombard, her mother, and 15 U.S. Army soldiers were killed instantly. Lombard was 33 years old. 33. The cause of the crash was attributed to the flight crew's inability to properly navigate over the mountains surrounding Las Vegas. As a precaution against the possibility of enemy Japanese bomber aircraft coming into American airspace from the Pacific, safety beacons normally used to direct night flights had been turned off, leaving the pilot and crew of the TWA flight without visual warnings of the mountains in their flight path. And to this day, some of the aircraft wreckage remains on Potosi Mountain, although it's very difficult to find due to the slope and brush.
Donna Fiora.
This is Donna Ferrato. Born in 1949, she is a photojournalist and activist known for her coverage of domestic violence and her documentation of the New York City neighborhood of Tribeca. Most of her photojournalism before moving to the United States was based in Paris. She would be hired to photograph elites and wealthy couples. And in the mid-80s, after witnessing the husband of one of those couples brutally beat his wife, Ferrato embarked on an independent documentation of domestic violence in the United States. She spent several years visiting women's shelters, emergency rooms, and prisons, and traveling with the police to make contact with people who were involved in domestic violence. The set of photos that she took that covered domestic violence was titled Living with the Enemy. Living with the Enemy is about the dark side of family life. Domestic violence did not threaten my childhood, nor did it intrude into my world until 1981, when on assignment for a magazine, I saw a man hit his wife. I was unprepared for his violence. It shattered the belief I'd been raised with that home is a refuge from the chaos of life. That experience changed my life as a photographer. Until then, I had been trying to show the beauty of people in love, shocked that love could go so wrong. I became obsessed with documenting domestic violence. Driven to try to do something about it, I found that a camera was my best weapon. Much of Living with the Enemy was born out of frustration. First, because I felt powerless in the face of violence I had seen. And second, because for a long time, no magazine would publish the pictures.
This actually sounds like a genuinely good person.
The Eugene Smith Award in 1986 that magazine editors began to take the project seriously. I felt that it was important to find ways to show as many aspects of the problem as I could, because this problem has been concealed from the public view for too long. There's over 24 photos that Donna Ferrato took for Living with the Enemy. Each photo comes with a short description and the date that it was taken. I picked out 9 that stuck out the most to me. Diana in a hospital. When Diana was rushed to the emergency room, her chest was covered with black tire marks. Her boyfriend had driven over her with his truck. Still in the hospital 2 days later, she saw her injuries for the first time and said quietly, "Well, I guess I don't look too bad." Diamond. As police arrested his father, Diamond said, "I hate you for hitting my mother. Don't come back to this house."
Janice, what a badass kid.
When she thought she escaped violence, Janice witnessed the murder of her friend Kim. whose husband killed her at the bus stop. Karen. He fights all the time, but it was never this bad before. Karen sobbed as her boyfriend was arrested. Her children had been awakened when the boyfriend threw Karen against the bathtub, knocking her unconscious. Later, Karen told a battered woman's advocate in the hospital emergency room that she didn't want to press charges. The boyfriend was released from the jail the following morning. First safe night. Mother and son slept peacefully after arriving at the women's abuse shelter. Amend, men's group. Bill cried as he admitted to the group that beating his wife when his son was watching reminded him of his own father. In front of his therapy group, Bill wept because he recognized there was little difference between the man that he'd become and the man that he dreaded as a young boy. Banked in Elizabeth. Banked ransacked the bathroom searching for his cocaine pipe. "I've hidden it," Elizabeth said, "to save our marriage. You're lying. You wanted it for yourself," Banked shouted. And suddenly, he hit Elizabeth. Rita, the original unbeatable woman. Rita divorced her husband in spite of the family and social pressure to stay with him, as he was the father of her 2 sons. She told her mother, "My sons don't recognize me now because of what he's done to me. I'll never go back." Jason defends his mother. Young Jason never goes to bed unarmed. Grabbing his plastic gun and rubber knife, he tells his mother, "If Daddy comes, I'll be able to stop him." This is Audrey Mestre, born August.
I don't know if I'll get water, but I definitely should step straight. Oh, shoot. Well, would you look at that? Time flies by real fast now, doesn't it? I'm gonna make this delivery. My sister's gonna be joining. I want to pile up some deep slate for her to use. I'm gonna try to go for 10 to 15, 10 to 30 double chest. Or 10 to 20, maybe all the way up to 30 double chests. If she burns through 30 double chests of deep slate, I might just go 20. And then maybe like another 20 of wood. If she burns through that, we're gonna have to have a talk. My sister, who really doesn't like to play survival, is wanting to join. And since, I don't play with keep inventory, I'm going to be kind and I'm going to give her some materials. Even like 10 double chests will do it. I don't know. 20. I could go 30, but honestly, I can heal my pickaxe really easily. I just gotta go pick up pumpkins. If she burns through half this entire amount of chests, I'm gonna have to sit her ass down and talk. Be like, listen, how are you spending all this deep slate? She's lucky I have a phase 2 beacon on my side. I'm gonna go to this island. I'm gonna sign off for the night. We did not work on the castle, but whatever. I'll start mining deep slate. I honestly might shield it. Yeah, I might have to shield it or put a cat near it. I need to temporarily make another pumpkin farm. I'm not gonna lie to you. 1 pumpkin for 1 emerald is one of my favorite trades ever. Take a silk touch. Actually, no, with bones you need it, but man. Grow a ton of pumpkins, maybe make an auto farm. I need to make like a temporary auto farm. I know how to do it. I just haven't done it because I'm busy on my other builds. This is gonna heal my pickaxe. Yeah, I need to build one of those. I don't know if it'll be that big because like yeah, I would love that much pumpkins and melons, but that is a little bit excessive. That should do it. No? Then this should. At least heal that pickaxe. Nope, you can't. It's just simply the way of life. You always gotta have a good amount of emeralds. I plan on making a giant glass dome on top of this island with a village in it. So, I have one choice. I don't really like to ruin too much of the environment, to a degree. Unless it's like a desert or something. But you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna start amassing glass. I'd rather just buy the glass, because honestly you get XP. And whatever, I have a little bit of money. Not insanely rich like my other world, but I have a good amount of money. There you are. Stock those right there. Yeah, I have a good stock of emeralds. This actually came from the fact that I started selling a lot of clay and stone to a bunch of my stonesmiths over there, and they helped me out. I still have a ton of clay. I have a whole shulker of clay. Yeah, I have. Does this answer your question? Not trying to be mean, I was saying it as a joke. Yeah, I did. I mean, technically, you don't have to beat the dragon to do it. All you really gotta do is bust your ass for probably about a couple hours, mine a ton of endstone or obsidian, and then you gotta bridge over. Which, the amount of energy you could spend bridging over painfully way outdoes the energy you spend killing the dragon. Anyway, I have college tomorrow, and I have to wake up early, so I have to go. When we come back, our goal is to get more deep slate for my sister, because I'm just being kind. I can sustain my pickaxe, and I honestly, you know what? Hey, whatever. I get diamonds out of it. That's kind of my payback. Turbine technology, wind turbine technology. We got 2 double chests done. Hey, we got 2 double chests done. And again, at least I was going to make a tunnel between the island and my main land, which I might do. But honestly, at least I can get diamonds. It's fine. It's not like insane. But it's like probably like maybe a higher end 5-figure, I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna go, guys. If you liked it, if you like this, feel free to sub. If you don't want to, don't have to. Do what you want. Try to reach 400. We need 10 more subs to reach our goals between Christmas. We're cooking. Alright. Have a nice one.